Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Yeah, we did have Colin. It was Colin that was talking to us about the systems approach.
Yeah.
Any one of these things, if you already have that, you can get the one component that you're missing, right? But this thing starts from way up here and goes all the way down. So let's be, I don't know if you can pick that up in the camera, Joe, but starting with a variety of different types of compost. You know, compost does matter, your input does matter, but you're going from there into your vermiflow. So walk through the process and why. Well, I think the idea of having the complete system for a school is really a cool thing, and it's really kind of cost effective. So kind of walk us through that again one more time.
Yeah, again, so with the entire system, your goal is to produce a microbial inoculant that's going to make your soils healthier.
Right.
So how do you do that? How do you know you're doing that? It starts with the composting process, because that's where you're cultivating the microbes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first piece, to get the microbes in that compost material. You can do that yourself by vermicomposting, or using a Johnson soup bioreactor. There's other ways you can do it yourself.
Sure.
So we have the vermiflow as our equipment piece for that.
Where you start. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then for those that are maybe on a larger scale, don't want to bother with producing their own compost, we have a few different compost products that we retail. One that we feature is the GrowZone compost. We have a great relationship with that company. They're based in North Carolina, and they've got a really good microbial diversity in their compost product.
Okay.
So they'll produce that and ship that out if you don't want to make your own compost. So you've got the microbes then in the compost material. Now you want to get the microbes out of the compost into a liquid to then apply. That's what the extractor does. So you're starting with bulk compost that contains the beneficial microbes. You're ending up with a liquid that, and really, we had our equipment tested by the Soil Food Web, and the efficiency of the extraction process really pulls out the vast majority of the microbes, to the point where they tested at certain auger speeds, because you can control the dilution of the extract.
Right.
And they were actually getting on some of the auger speeds higher than 100%, which only means that it was more effective than the shake test they were using to put the microbes under the microscope. Right? So there's a process of shaking up a sample, then taking a drop and putting it on a microscope. And the machine was extracting more thoroughly than that process.
Okay.
So you've got a liquid, you've got the microbes in the liquid, you've got whatever humics and fulvics and nutrients from the compost material as well. And then there's an application piece that we've come up with a few different ways of doing it, but like you said, a lot of those solutions already exist, so it's not something we focused very heavily on.
Right.
But the application component, again, what are you going to do? Is it an in-furrow? Are you going to do a root drench, in your greenhouse? Are you going to do a broadcast spray on your pasture? Many different ways of doing that. But then the final piece, and this is kind of, it verifies everything you're doing, is to have a microscope kit. And there's other testing, analysis components that we might add over time as well.
Sure.
But this way you can put your soil or your compost or the extract under the microscope. You can actually see the microbes. You can see the protozoa, the nematodes, the fungi, bacteria. And if you've trained with like the Soil Food Web School or with Matt Powers, you can really understand what makes a good product.
Right.
What you're seeing under the slide, what does that actually tell you? And then you can make informed decisions over time. You can look at your soil before you do anything. You can look at your soils, after you've made your application. And then as you see improvements in your water retention, in your pest and disease pressure,
it's working,
in the health of your crops, you can take additional samples, and you should be able to see the microbial community expanding in the soil, correlating to all of those results.
Right.
So that's our proof that we're not here selling snake oil. You can put it under a microscope. You can see it.
Right. and then you see the results in the farm plot. But what I like is the idea for kids to be able to see it all
Yeah.
and to be able to hands-on in a pretty cost-effective way for a school. So, but to do it, you kind of need that whole system because
Yeah, you
schools,
do.
most schools, if they have a compost program, they maybe they can make their compost, and you want the schools to you want to encourage them to use leaves that are coming down from their own trees or
Yep.
from using food from their cafeteria because we're trying to do waste minimization. So that part is not the integral part for what you're doing, but taking it now, working a worm community for a long time, that process, that continuous flow, allows you to then pull the extracts off, and then, of course, having the microscope, being able to pop that up on a big screen. Uh, it kind of it's the entire loop. So it's really a cool system.
And one thing that bears pointing out that, Mike, I know you're familiar with is that we use one word, compost, to describe just a vast
Oh,
array of different materials.
anything you're breaking down, really.
Yeah, anything that's kind of decomposed organic material, right?
Right.
So within that spectrum, you can have stuff that has incredible microbiology and stuff that has very poor microbiology.
Right.
That's again where the microscope comes in. You can see, like, I pre-compost everything I feed to my worms. But if I took that pre-compost material and made an extract from it, it would not be as good as once it goes through the worms.
Not even close. Yeah.
So it's important to kind of understand that as well, that just because, and I don't even really like the term compost extract, we've inherited it because that's kind of what this process is being called.
Mm-hmm.
But it really kind of undersells the biological component. And if somebody isn't familiar with that, you think you could just take, I've heard people say, can I just take manure and make an extract from that? And technically, yes, you can, but the biological quality of that is not going to be the same as it is.
Sure. And it has to do with the entire process of composting and your inputs, right? So that
Yeah.
that's a little more of a complicated concept, but um, you're completely right in you can compost at a school, you can compost paper products, scrap
Mhm.
paper, you can trees, branches, whatever. Now, if they're indigenous or endemic to that area, chances are they've got, better properties. But what we're doing in a compost, uh, we want the physical structure, which is the carbon, which
Yeah.
is, what we've broken down now. We want, and then we're also getting the nutrients, more of a nutrient base,
Yep.
and biology, but it's not the same as this because this is like you use the term biology on steroids, which
Yeah.
makes no sense. But the bottom line is you do have concentrates. So and it's kind of important for people to understand. There's three words that often can confuse, and one is leachate, one is extract, and one is tea.
Tea. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the tea, well, it's the same thing. That I was surprised. We took compost and we took worm compost and we put it in a mesh bag and we got a big aerator tank and we created our compost tea, which is tricky too, by the way, because
Yep.
you can do it too long, too short, whatever. But when we analyzed it, it was the nutrient was like is almost as much as three times higher than the actual compost. I'm like, how is that possible? But it's just the concentration of it all, I guess. I don't know. Um, but that was the lab findings when we got it, right? So the tea is one concept. Um, Leachate, when we're doing large worms in rows, windrows, we have overhead sprinklers, and uh, for the most part, that will absorb, but we're not turning worms. We're pulling it out, so it's not the same as a normal thermophilic process. We don't need the heat. So, but what we end up with is leachate that comes off of it.
Yep.
Leachate can be really good, or it can be a little dangerous. And that the reason being is because it goes into the ground and then you collect it in one spot. So the leachate from the compost itself, from the worms, is great. It's good stuff, but you don't know what's in the ground. So if that was a chemical, like somebody changed their oil in their truck and it's going through that, it's not going to be, it could be potentially dangerous if there's, pathogens or whatever. So leachate could be a little dangerous. So it really, if you pay attention to where you're creating your leachates and you get that tested and you're pretty sure that you don't have heavy metals, you don't have pesticides or herbicides, then that leachate's okay to use. And we use it in our worm barn because we tested it all.
Okay.
But we don't sell it. We just take it and we put it back into our compost pile.
Okay.
When we're doing things and when we're composting. But that gets us to the extract. Extract, you're not getting as much carbon because your physical.
Yeah, you're
so you're not you don't have as much.
Yep.
Still have some, and you don't have as much of the nutrient because that's not what you're shooting for. You're really shooting for that microbiology. So to me, it's the system is perfect if you've got good carbon in your soil to begin with, and or if you're putting a compost layer down, that gives that extract something to eat, right? And then there's something what's great about it and so fun about it. It's like cooking, right? You can go to a French restaurant, an Italian restaurant, and if the chef is really creative, he's still taking, or she is still taking flour and water and sugar or whatever, but the variation and the quality of the food is so much different. Your extracts, depending on how active you want the microbiology, you can put molasses in, and now you're going to get a lot of activity early on. You can put kelp in. You can do other things when you get more sophisticated. The average person putting a little compost down, putting some liquid product down from your extractor, they're going to get great results and they're going to be safe. But there's always people who want to tweak it and take it to the next level. But it just gives you lots of options. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, I could give you a little rundown on kind of our understanding with extracts, tea, and then what extracts are doing.
Sure.
I'm just going to set this on the ground so they don't
so it
sit here holding it. So first of all, full respect for compost tea. We're not here to say, you have to do extracts because teas, we're obviously focused on the extracts. I think teas have their place.
Sure.
It's particularly, I think, in a foliar environment where they tend to be more viscous, they're stickier. What we've seen when you're making a tea, when you're adding oxygen, foods, and you're trying to build out the microbial population, within that window of time, we've seen some data, and I'll share the visuals with you guys.
That's great.
That shows, well, if I should back up, when you make an extract, you're just pulling the population of microbes from the compost into the liquid. So there's a very close one-to-one correlation between what the microbial population looks like in the extract compared to the compost.
Right.
In tea, it almost completely shifts. And this is based on DNA analysis from Dr. Zach Jones that we'll share with you, to where you're expanding the population of overall microbes, but you're really only picking a handful of strains that are really doing the multiplication.
Right.
So you end up with the biodiversity looks completely different. It favors, just a handful of strains altogether. Now, those are beneficial strains. And this is where, in a foliar environment, you simply want beneficial microbes to outcompete the pathogens. So we've heard from various folks out there, that's where teas have their best application, is on foliar surfaces. And with an extract, you have, this wider biodiversity. You want that down in the soil, so it's a better soil application. It's also less viscous. It can infiltrate better than tea. So that's kind of the general difference between the two. When you're making an extract, as you're saying, almost everybody will add food for the microbes so that when you put them in the soil, they have a way to get viable right away.
Right.
Over time, they'll build that relationship with the plant where they're feeding off plant exudates.
That's concept.
But in the near term, if you give them some food to consume, a lot of people will use the analogy of sending them to work with a lunch pail. They're able to establish themselves in the soil, start building their colonies. Especially if you're planting a seed at that time, it takes a while for the seed to germinate, start photosynthesizing and producing those
Yeah.
those exudates.
It'd be interesting to see as we play with it going forward, but I would think the teas are probably better as a foliar. Um, they've got a nutrient that can get absorbed in a foliar environment, especially if you're going through veraison in grapes, for instance. And right during that period, you only have a month or so, right? And if you're trying to get it through the soil, it just doesn't have the time to be
Yeah.
picked up by the roots as quick. But the tea might also be good in a situation where you're doing a seed coating or something like that.
Well,
But
yeah, I mean we know people that use extracts for seed coating, and that's where, again, you're planting the seed, you want the biodiversity at the root
right
level.
there, okay.
Yeah, and it's the other thing, extracts are scalable. That's how we can produce extractors at different levels. There's a lot of operating constraints with tea where you have this window. You have to be very careful
Yeah,
to arrive at the product that you want at the right time
right.
before it goes anaerobic. Then you've got to apply it. You're kind of, you can make a bigger batch of extract, especially with a continuous flow system like ours,
It's way
than you can a batch.
It's just so much more cost effective,
Yeah.
and it's easier to work with. Your system, you can take that and move it wherever your water source is or wherever you want to move it, and you can go from one farm to another, or if you have a huge farm, you can take it and make batches throughout. So it's more modular, it's more portable. And it overall is serving that function a lot better. So I agree with you. So
Let me point out one thing real quick, because I definitely believe in building soil carbon by top dressing compost. It's a great way of doing it. But you actually can build soil carbon by using extracts, even though you're screening all of that material out, because you've got the ecosystem in the soil that the plant is going to feed by photosynthesis.
absolutely.
Exudate production, more root development, all of that is carbon based. The bodies of the microbes, as they reproduce, is carbon. So all of that is actual carbon being built in the soil, even though you're not adding any carbon
Sure.
into the application.
And it works in certain soils, it'll work better than others. So in a sandy soil where you just don't have, I think there's soils in some of the farms in the West where the only thing growing that plant is the chemical that they're injecting to grow it, right? So we've gotten to dangerous levels of carbon, less than 0.5%, where now you're seeing pests and you're seeing disease because there's just no resilience in the soil itself. So in a situation like that, adding some compost or at least getting the process started.
Absolutely.
If you're not over tilling and you're allowing that crop residue to break down, ultimately, yes, you're creating that carbon and the microbes are going to go to town on that carbon and you now create that. And that's the whole idea, is to get a natural cycle where we're not putting so much inputs in. If the only input you're putting in is an extract, it's cost effective and it's easy to put in. You can pump it into a pivot system. Maybe someday we'll go into a drip. But for sure, it's easy to drench. It's easy to throw through a pivot system. You even talked about your row croppers as they're seeding. They're just putting in just a minuscule 8 gallons per acre is almost insane.
Yeah.
How it's free. It's basically, at that point, it's like water. It's cheaper than water, So those systems right now are readily available, and those are probably more important and more cost effective for a farmer than anything else. So it really just depends on the application and the soil and the farm you're working with. But anyway, that's
Yeah, so when you do your wrap up, you're going to talk about the Hiwassee website, if you can mention that too. But then you also want to say that Hiwassee is coming to Arizona. It's going to be at Grand Canyon University. It's going to be a spotlight in our conference.
okay.
And we're going to do a field guide to help this be more accessible to kids. So that's
Great. Okay. I'm on it. So you're going to be coming to Arizona. We're welcoming you to one of our conferences at Grand Canyon University. We've got some big shows coming up, the Ag Show, I think, and the U.S. Compost Show coming in, I think, in February.
Yep.
That you'll be out there and we'll be out there. Your website is, what is the website?
It's HiwasseeProducts.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two S's.
2 S's, 2 E's.
2 E's. Right. Okay.
We can pop a QR code or something.
Yeah, we'll get that on the website. So anybody wants more information, that's great.
Yep.
And I think at this point we can wrap up this section of the podcast. But appreciate you being on the podcast. Anyone who's watching, please like the podcast. Please subscribe, and definitely put comments down. Any questions or comments you have about this process. For a lot of people, this is kind of new. They've never seen it or heard it. Some people may not believe it yet, but it's a real thing. So please join us and comment and get interactive with us on this one. This is kind of an important one. This is, I think, a big game changer for both schools, but also for plenty of different farming applications. So thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Okay.
Pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.